Hello, everyone, and welcome to Richardson Sales Performance's 30-minute webinar on Agile selling to drive buyer confidence. My name is Andrea Grudnitsky, and I will be your host today. Before we begin, we wanted to say that we appreciate you spending time with us today amidst a very troubling and uncertain environment. We know that, like us, many of your hearts and minds are focused on the crisis unfolding for the Ukrainian people. As many in the private sector join in the fight against the violence, we recognize our duty to lend support while also continuing to focus on helping our teams navigate their jobs every single day. We are fortunate to be able to spend some time with our teams and each other here while others are experiencing such tragic events. As we think about our teams who are out in the market selling today, one of the most important things we can do for them is provide them with the confidence and the skills to navigate a highly disruptive buying and selling landscape. Uncertainty is certainly at the forefront. So we will spend the next 30 minutes talking about why equipping your sellers to be more agile can actually help them and help your buyers who really need assistance in making a buying decision. Now, we're going to assume that everybody knows how these Zoom sessions work, so we'll skip the instructions. But I will tell you that we will hold a quick Q&A at the end of our session today. So let's jump in. Joining me today are my colleagues, Sarah Doherty, who will be producing our webinar today, and our two presenters, Chris Tenay, our Chief Product Officer, and Pamela Young, a Senior Facilitator with Richardson Sales Performance. Chris, over to you.
Thanks so much, Andrea. It's great to be with you today, and thanks for your opening comments. We're going to focus on four things today in our agenda. The first is what's happening in the current buying environment and the pressure that that's putting on sales professionals and, frankly, putting on your buyers as well. There's a lot of complexity, a lot of uncertainty, and we're going to talk about why that requires a new approach for the seller. The second is about how you can bring agility into selling to equip sales professionals with a new way to lean into driving consensus, building momentum, and creating customer-centric buying experiences. And the third is how we enable teams to embrace agility in the flow of work. So much about building an agile approach is about not only learning the skills, but changing the way you work. And so we'll talk about how we can enable that right in a CRM. And then finally, we'll make sure to reserve time for Q&A and address any questions that you might have. Disruption is the new normal. According to AlixPartners' 2021 disruption survey, 85% of survey respondents agreed that disruption is the primary strategic challenge facing their business, and it's here to stay. 90% of executives tell McKinsey that they believe that the disruption that we've seen over the last 2 years is going to affect the fundamentals of their business. What this means is that sellers are under a new kind of pressure. If we look at the next slide, one of the things that we track on a regular basis is the increasing number of stakeholders in the B2B buying process. Just in the past 10 years, that number is up 70%. And what's interesting is that 81% of people involved in the buying process on the customer side are non-C-suite staff members who've been invited in to share an opinion and to align on the right solution. Buying has become more consensus-driven and less linear. It's an iterative process. It loops back on itself. People revisit decisions, and it creates misalignments. And this means that sellers need to lean into actively creating a new kind of value in the buying process. What's happening with customers is that they're facing this increasingly complex landscape. There are just more and more decisions to make. It's called decision complexity. And choice overload is the behavioral science which helps us understand that when your customer is faced with too many choices, sometimes the easiest thing to do is just not make any choice at all and stay with the status quo. I think about back when we were doing face-to-face customer meetings, I was going into a customer meeting and I really needed a pack of gum. And the only place to buy a pack of gum near where I was meeting the customer was a big box retail store. And so I went into the big box store and I looked at the gum rack, and there were 90 choices of gum that I could choose from in this store. And what do you think happened? My mind shut down. I had other things to focus on. I couldn't process that much complexity heading into my customer meeting. And so I walked out of the store without buying a pack of gum. This is creating stress for your customer, but it creates an opportunity for sales professionals. The opportunity is to lean in and help buyers make sense of all of the choices and the options that they have available to them. Help them make better decisions and lean into driving consensus inside the buying organization. So how do you do this and create a buyer-centric approach at the same time? To help solve that, we looked at how businesses were leaning into embracing change and disruption by using an agile approach in other parts of the enterprise. This is called enterprise agility, and it's a proven way that businesses can create good customer experiences while embracing changing requirements. And it inspired us to think about how we could apply this in a sales context. So before I share with you how we do that, I want to just ask a quick poll question. To what extent are you hearing about agility coming up in the customer conversations that you're having? Almost always, once or twice a month, or never? Share with us in the poll. All right, so almost always, once or twice a month, or never. All right, let's see how you voted. If we can share the results. 38% say almost always, 38% say once or twice a month, and only 23% say never. So between those first two, we're seeing a significant 76%, if I'm doing my math correctly, percent of the time people are talking about agility in customer conversations. So how do we lean in and think about what that means for organizations and for customers? When MIT looked at organizations that were using an agile approach to respond to disruption, what they found was that organizations taking an agile approach grew revenues 37% faster and maintained 30% higher profitability. So your customers are thinking about it. There's data to show that it's an effective strategy. Now what we need to do is think about how we take agile principles and apply them to selling. So when you think about applying agile principles to selling, what words come to mind? This is going to be a word cloud. So if you can share in the chat, what words come to mind when you think about applying agility to selling? Chat in the words and we will have a look. Customer needs. Good, yep, putting customers at the center. Variety. Easier buying, flexibility, speed, listening, I like a lot. Proactiveness, these are great words. All of these are words which are core to taking a more agile approach. So what we did was we leaned in and we looked at what's called the Agile Manifesto. The Agile Manifesto is a set of 4 values and 12 principles that were created in the early 2000s to help software developers take a more flexible, proactive, customer-centric approach. And we distilled that down into a set of agile selling principles. There are 4 agile selling principles that we have anchored around to help sales professionals take that agile approach and apply it to the kinds of customer interactions they're having and ultimately drive a more agile sales process. And to help explain the agile selling principles and how they come to life, I'm going to turn it over to my colleague, Pam Young.
Thank you, Chris. There are 4 agile principles, and the first is work from facts, not assumptions. If we're to be agile, we need to anchor our decision-making in a consistent and repeatable method so that we can objectively determine where we stand in any given sales opportunity. Number 2, visualize progress in the pursuit. Data is the modern currency of sales and enablement. In order to make data-driven decisions, we need tools that enable us to visualize the progress being made in an opportunity in order to guide our thinking about our best next move. Number 3, welcome changing requirements, reflect and adjust and deliver continuous value. Now here's the opportunity to really challenge our thinking about how we plan and execute our selling motions, to embrace an approach that welcomes change as a chance to create competitive advantage by how we proactively manage for it. Embrace it, stay connected and aligned with the client as others struggle to maintain relevance. And number 4, prioritize live customer conversations. The creators of the Agile Manifesto understood the value of live communication. In sales, live conversations are the moment of truth where all of your planning and your preparation come to life. And done well, it's a chance to demonstrate credibility, create confidence, and a differentiated customer experience. These set of Agile selling principles, when applied, enable sellers to navigate in today's complex environment in a way that provides a competitive advantage. So let's take a closer look at each one of them. Work from facts, not assumptions. Our first Agile principle. Now, this seems obvious, but in fact, one of the key reasons that sellers lose deals is due to the assumptions that they make as they navigate through the sale. Behavioral science tells us why this is the case. It's because as human beings, we have the tendency to anchor onto the first piece of information that we learn, and then to continue to run with that information as a basis for decision-making, ignoring or discounting conflicting information. Now, you might call this tendency happy ears, but to counteract this tendency, sellers really do need an objective way to analyze their sales pursuits. The sales formula states that success is a function of pain, power, vision, value, and consensus. These are the 5 critical elements of a sale that if we as a seller can execute well against them, we're well positioned to win the deal. And this is the key to agility, because as we objectively analyze where we are in a deal after each sprint, we can determine where we need to pivot and what move will enable us to be in the most strategic position to maintain momentum and to win the deal. Our next Agile principle is visualize progress, and it is a core tenet of Agile. Behavioral science tells us that because of confirmation bias, and that is, as human beings, our tendency to become anchored in our thinking, as sellers, we need tools to enable us to objectively score where we are in the opportunity, see our strengths and our vulnerabilities so that we can determine our best next move. The Strength of Sale tool does just that for us. For each of the 5 critical elements of a sale, there is an objective scoring metric that the seller and their manager can use to analyze the sale. Now, this is critically important in today's complex environment where during the course of the sale, it's not uncommon to have new stakeholders introduced with new priorities that set the opportunity moving in a new direction. As sellers, we need a way to make informed decisions so that we can respond to those changes in an agile way that yields the best results. And that leads us to our next Agile principle, and it's this: welcome change and use it to reflect and deliver continuous value. Consider this quote from Jeff Bezos. Doing sprints and embracing Agile principles are not just a nice to have, according to Jeff Bezos. They, in fact, are the only way to create a sustainable advantage over our competition. Now, we discussed how having an objective scoring mechanism allows us to have a clear view of the opportunity so that we can pivot as we receive new information throughout the opportunity pursuit. Selling sprints are designed to enable us to utilize that information so that every time I engage with the customer, I can do so in a way that shows my preparation, my professionalism, and allows me to differentiate myself from the competition. Every time I engage with the customer, I'm executing a selling sprint. And in each selling sprint, I'm going to do 3 things. Number 1, I'm going to prepare. Sprint selling introduces to your team critical thinking tools that will enable them as sellers to ensure that they've done the right type of prep to be set up for success. Number 2 is engage. Now, this is a moment of truth when they're in front of the customer. And in sprint selling, we equip sellers with the skills and the tools to show up well. And then number 3 is advance. Now, this is after the call, whereas the seller, I reflect on what went well, where there's an opportunity for improvement. This is where I do my follow-up, my follow through, and I utilize the strength of sale to score the opportunity, set a target for the next engagement so that I can strategically maintain momentum. And that brings us to our 4th Agile selling principle, and that is prioritize live customer conversations. Now, you know that in sales, live conversations are the moment of truth where your planning and your prep come to life. Today's buying environment, as Chris has said, it's complex, it's dynamic, and a traditional linear approach just isn't going to get the job done. In the sprint selling methodology, the 4 drivers are the key activities that a seller needs to master to be able to make progress against the sales formula and win the deal. And in today's environment, where the buying process isn't linear, sellers need the ability to pivot. These 4 drivers enable sellers to pivot and ensure that the customer is in the center of our activities throughout the sales process so that we are doing the right things in the right way at the right time. Which brings us to the second aspect of prioritizing live customer conversations, and that is how we show up. I invite you to think about this quote from PwC. Think about the risk of one customer engagement that goes poorly. We need to ensure that our sellers are equipped to create relationship and build trust. And in order to do that, they really do need to be able to demonstrate these 6 critical communication skills. And it all starts with presence. Now, seasoned sellers take this for granted, but to be really effective, you need to have a strategy for how you create presence to establish credibility, conviction, and trust. And in today's complex environment with a wide range of stakeholders, you need to be able to establish trust and rapport with those stakeholders so that you can execute a questioning strategy where open dialogue takes place in order to accurately diagnose current state and then convincingly create a vision of what outcomes are possible in the future. And all of this rests on the ability to be able to actively listen and check for feedback to ensure that you're continually in alignment with your customer. We believe that these 6 critical communication skills, that sellers not only need to master them, but they need to maintain them. And they all work in unison. So to be really effective, sellers need to excel at all 6. The sprint selling methodology is based on an organized set of opportunity pursuit best practices. And these best practices work because they're rooted in science, provide repeatable results, and are built on the 4 Agile selling principles. And each of these 4 principles come to life in a Salesforce tool that enable these behaviors in the flow of work. So Chris Tanay is going to give us a tour of what that looks like.
Thank you so much, Pam. Yeah, so Pam did a great job laying out the 4 Agile selling principles and how those come to life. But how do you make that easy for sellers to do? There are a lot of components. There's scoring, there's executing sprints, and there's having the right skills at the right time. And taking a tech-forward enablement approach is key to bringing this to life for sellers right in the flow of work right inside of Salesforce.com. So we're going to look at an opportunity. As Pam shared, the first Agile selling principle is work from facts, not assumptions. And that starts with scoring your opportunity, moving from those gut instincts or those assumptions and avoiding having happy ears. So we've created a set of objective criteria, objective pursuit criteria, against which you score the 5 values that Pam talked about: pain, power, vision, value, and consensus. And what's really powerful is not only understanding where you are right now in the opportunity, but also setting a target, understanding where you need to get to in order to be most effective at moving that opportunity through the selling process. So you see here, you've got your current strength of sale, you've got your target strength of sale, and you can start to identify what the data is telling you about where you might want to focus your next time. Based on your targets, the system can also recommend next steps and next drivers that you might want to use in order to get there. So that's the first selling principle: work from facts, not assumptions. And having objective pursuit criteria helps you do that on every opportunity. The second Agile selling principle is visualize your progress. And progress starts to be easier to track when you start to look at it as a trend. How is this opportunity trending or evolving over time? So if I zoom in here, I can see this opportunity has been tracked since August, and each of these lines represent a different value. There's vision, there's consensus, and as time has gone on, I've continued to interact with this customer in sprints, planning, executing, and advancing individual sprints. You'll see that I've gotten improved on things like consensus. But as of the last call, something happened. My consensus score dropped from a 6 to a 4, and that should be a red flag for that seller that there's work to be done in the next sprint at helping to improve the score on consensus. So the second principle, as we were talking about before, visualize your progress, and this tool makes it really easy right inside of Salesforce to not only score the opportunity, but to visualize the progress over time and see where you might want to spend more time driving strength in that sale. Now, how do you go about executing sprints? Pam did a great job talking about the importance of taking an agile sprint-based approach, which is 3 parts in a sprint: preparing for a customer interaction, engaging the customer, and then advancing the opportunity from there. So great execution of sprints all comes down to how you plan your calls based on data, use the drivers that we're talking about, and then rescore the opportunity afterwards. So let's have a look at what that looks like in practice. Right here in Salesforce, we're going to have the call plan, and the call plan is all drawing off of that scoring data, right? Working from facts, not assumptions. So here's my strength of sales score. Here are my recommended next steps. And I'm going to start by documenting, what do I know about my customer? What do I know about the value that I bring to the table? And then the most important piece is, what's my plan for engaging the customer? Which of those drivers am I going to use? We talked about the importance of driving consensus and leaning into driving consensus. So I'm going to select that as one of my drivers. And now I'm going to plan for how I engage with the customer in the moment of truth, the moment that matters. So here's my call plan. I'm going to go and execute that customer conversation. That's engaging. And then critically important, the third part of executing an effective Agile sprint is how do I reflect at the end of the engagement in order to advance the opportunity to the next stage. And so the tool makes it really easy on one screen to just reflect on, did I achieve my call objective? What did I achieve? What didn't I achieve? And where do I think I did things well? Where do I think maybe there were gaps or opportunities to do them better? So I'll reflect, I'll rescore the opportunity, and that will get me prepared to execute my next sprint. So prepare, engage, and reflect to advance in each sprint. And then the fourth Agile selling principle is prioritizing live conversations. And that's where really building and coaching those skills with managers is the game changer. It's what enables you to differentiate yourself. And so the tool builds in for sellers and managers the opportunity to compare reflections. Which skills did I use effectively? Which skills could I build on and improve with coaching? And how can I continue to up my game so that in the moment of truth, in the live customer conversation, I'm performing at the top of my game? So that's the tool. It's 4 components, all aligned to the Agile selling principles that make it easy for sellers to execute a differentiated Agile selling approach right inside of Salesforce.com. So we're coming up to the end of our time. I'm going to pause here. We're going to open it up for questions and answers, and love to hear what's on your mind.
Great, thank you so much, Chris. As folks are starting to use the Q&A functionality, we'll answer as many questions as we have time for, and you can type them right into that Q&A there. We did also have a few come in over chat. But we did want to let you know that if you are interested in learning a little bit more about what Pam and Chris shared about in our sprint selling program, we do have a blended offering. And in the chat, we're also going to send you a link to our website page in case you want to learn more there. But know that it's available in person or virtual. We've also got digital learning that goes along with it, and then that CRM-enabled workflow tool that Chris mentioned. So let's jump then, Chris and Pam, to some of the questions that have come in. The first one from Costas, this is a great question here. What about presumptive questions to try to gather more background information from the customer? Is that in contrast to that first Agile selling principles, which is, right, work from facts, not assumptions? Chris or Pam, you want to jump in on that one?
Sure, I'd love to, and then maybe Pam wants to add on. I think you know, Costas, what you saw in the tool is that set of objective criteria that's moving from assumptions to what am I documenting in fact with the customer? Do I have verifiable outcomes effectively for how I'm scoring that opportunity? And so as you think about the impact that has on your questioning strategy, you know, you move from maybe the presumptive questions to questions where you and your customer are collaborating and agreeing where you stand in the process. It's a very transparent process. And it actually enables the customer to help you evaluate where you stand relative to those criteria. So it's actually a very empowering experience for the customer as well as the seller. Pam, anything you would add?
I just want to say it's a great question. And one of the things we do, Costas, is we help your sellers with the best critical thinking tools to go into the call with a hypothesis, because customers today expect us to come in well informed. And then we're going to validate that hypothesis. And then, as Chris said, we're going to build from there so that we have a solid understanding of the client environment.
Love that word, Pam, hypothesis. Thank you. I think that's a good frame of mind for sales professionals. And we have another question here then from Michael. What changes do you expect this will have on the sales manager?
Such a great question.
Yeah, thrilled to hear we're talking about sales managers. Yeah, go ahead, Chris.
It's such a great question. And you know, as I shared, the tool actually has a whole workflow for sales managers to be able to coach and inspect the preparation, execution, and advancing of opportunities. We also often pair with this program an opportunity review module for managers to help them use the strength of sale tools and think about what the next questions and the next steps would be for moving that opportunity through the buying process. So it's a great question, and managers are your force multipliers in helping sellers execute this methodology effectively.
Yep. Chris, thank you. I know we are at the bottom of the hour, so some folks may have to jump. If you do, thank you for joining. But if you have a couple of minutes and want to stay on, we're happy to continue to take a couple more questions here. So Chris and Pam Renee asks us, how does this align with existing sales methodologies?
It's a great question. So again, happy to start. If you're familiar with Richardson Sales Performance, you'll know that we are the home of two approaches, legacy approaches to selling, solution selling and consultative selling. And this really represents the best of both of those approaches. So as we think about how we evolve both solution selling and consultative selling for the future, this is really the next logical extension of both of those methodologies. That having been said, there are pieces that some customers may want to retain from existing methodologies, and part of being agile is thinking about how we integrate those into what you're already doing. So talk with us. We're happy to do an evaluation, think about what you're currently using, and what the next logical step might be for your sellers to evolve their approach and add agility into what they're doing.
Thanks, Chris. Okay, one last quick question, and it's a bit of a big one, so it might require discussion afterwards, but do you know if the same CRM theories can be applied to Microsoft Dynamics?
They absolutely can. Microsoft Dynamics is an important CRM. We have not built a software integration natively for Microsoft Dynamics, but it's a system that we do a lot of work with. And if you're a Microsoft Dynamics user, please get in touch with us. We'll have someone from our CRM team do an evaluation with you and look at how we can take concepts from today's presentation and embed them in your Dynamics environment.
Great. Well, Chris and Pam, thank you so much, and everyone who stayed on, thank you for joining us. We appreciate your time today, and we hope that you have a safe and healthy week ahead. Take care.